Welcome to the latest episode of FoodTech Stories. I'm your host, FoodTech marketing expert Megan Thomas. FoodTech Stories features the leaders pioneering new approaches to technology, collaboration, and storytelling in the food tech and ag tech space. Food and agricultural changing, and fresh ideas and leadership are needed to sustainably feed the growing global population. Join us every other week as we talk to a founder, operator, or visionary in food and agriculture. On today's episode, my guest is founder and CEO of Marine Biologics, Patrick Griffin. Patrick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Megan. Happy to be here.
We're going to be talking about how Marine Biologics is building a biomaterials business around macroalgae. First off, I'd like to understand kind of folks' origin story. So what first drew you to entrepreneurship?
Well, my background is, funny enough, not at all in the world of the bioeconomy or food. I come from software and internet. My track record has been really starting companies. My first company I was involved with was a pioneer in the online identity management space. So we were one of the first online identity companies at the dawn of internet banking, PayPal, in the early days of payments. We built the first identity company. We were backed by Andreessen Horowitz and a roster of tier one venture capital companies. I think I really came up through the world of business development and corporate development, partnerships, sales, operations was really the beginning of my entrepreneurship. And then I parlayed that experience into a second company that I was the first employee of, which is in the blockchain space, digital assets, company called Ripple, not Ripple Milk, Ripple Digital Asset Company, where I was the first employee and helped to grow that company to a multi-billion-dollar recurring revenues business from 3 people and up to about 1,000 people. My experience has been in sort of scale, borrowing heavily from the Silicon Valley playbook of growth and systems, processes, hiring, talent, capital, setting up the right goals and milestones for a business, repeating that over and over and over again. So I've successfully done that twice, and I'm looking to parlay that experience into the next venture, which for me is in an entirely new space, a new chapter for me, and a new chapter in my career, looking at where I can make an impact in the bioeconomy and really specifically honing in on biomanufacturing as the space I really wanted to see where there was an opportunity to make a difference and build a compelling business.
And why did you select biomanufacturing? What drew you to that field?
I initially was really looking at a range of different climate technologies, and I made some investments and looked around. I just really saw a gap in our physical economy, which is today largely built on top of petrochemicals. And it was a part of the story that I feel like was neglected in the climate tech of yore prior to the administration changes. But where most of the investment intention was landing was largely around carbon capture and sequestration, new energy systems, upgrading the food system. I just felt like there was actually an opportunity to think about the materials economy, which is sort of the other part of the story that needs to be transitioned if you want to have a full transition. There's already a tension just around provision enough biomass to support our food and fuel needs. But if you add into the mix chemicals and materials, the math is difficult to pencil out. And so I feel like there was an opportunity there. The world of biomanufacturing is kind of where the natural landing point, port of entry. Now, a lot of the attention is in precision fermentation. And I actually thought, hey, maybe looking at untapped, high growth, sustainable crops could be an interesting starting point for an insertion point for us, and leveraging the new tools that are emerging in artificial intelligence and machine learning to really see what we can do to exploit crops that are maybe not on land, but in the ocean where there's an opportunity to expand the biomass.
When I get the chance to meet listeners of the podcast, they often mention the quality of the production as one of their favorite parts of the show. That praise is due to the team that edits the show, TJG Media. Their team works with the raw audio files of each interview to enhance the quality of the sound, minimize external noise, and cut out the natural pauses that occur in conversation to create each fast-paced episode. Plus, they create engaging short-form videos to promote each episode on social media. Visit tjgmediallc.com to find out more. I've heard around kind of algae-based systems in biomanufacturing, there's a perception that some of the past efforts have not really borne out. How is your company approaching it differently and learning from the lessons of the past?
I think that's definitely the case where there have been quite a few at-bats with algae businesses, and particularly that's been microalgae. you're talking about raceways and fermentation systems. It's a close proxy to precision fermentation and synbio, where you're dealing with unicellular organisms, trying to engineer them to produce or secrete either a protein or a biochemical, and then harvest the resulting product. I think there have been significant cost challenges. Unit economics have been pretty challenging. I think the last 5 years have really laid bare the challenges on the economics of some of these traditional synbio businesses. Our approach is a little bit different. We really are trying to create a new wave in biomanufacturing, looking at mining existing crops. So get away from big capex, steel in the ground, precision fermentation style businesses, which also have long runway lead times on the R&D front, where you're dealing with molecular biology and the challenges of modifying an organism's genetics to produce the molecules that your customers need. There's an opportunity now with machine learning, big data. Take a look at the chemicals and the chemistry that's native to the crops. Look for novel structure function relationships that can play out in a commercial use case where the functionality can be sufficiently high enough. We talk about hyper functionality. Your pricing power can bring the unit economics like in the money and make it actually profitable to do the last step of extracting those biomolecules or combinations of biomolecules.
Have you identified specific use cases that you're addressing first?
Yeah. So today, I think our primary focus is really getting to a point where we can point to hyperfunctionality. Right now, I think we've got great functionality on par with sort of industry benchmarks that you're seeing in the world of food and emulsification. What we ultimately are striving for is hyperfunctionality. We want to see 2x emulsification functionality so we can price our products 2 times as high and show that our approach to biomanufacturing can yield results that command a premium price and can stand on top of a biomass that can be valorized, I think, more readily than previous attempts with microalgae and synbiology.
How have you applied your experiences from your prior tech startup endeavors to marine biologics?
I think the first thing is a real emphasis on team and talent. That's an especially important element of our business. I don't come from the world of biology and chemistry. I really have had to lean heavily on finding the right team, the right partners to really build up our capabilities. So we have a big emphasis on identifying great talent. We even acquired a small team out of Canada that had a great group of physical chemists, people who really worked with macroalgae and seaweed and have a strong organic chemistry background. What we have tried to do here at Marine Biologics is bring together sort of a magic mix of machine learning and data science with physical chemistry and operations. And that's really a reflection of our team. We're a small team now, chemistry, deep operational expertise. We're also bringing in product development in from the food world and combining that with what I think is some pretty strong commercial experience. And then beyond that, big investment in project management for us and systems and processes has been very significant to move fast and make sure that we're learning as we go.
Absolutely, and should help with scaling, I would imagine.
I'm familiar with the Scrum fast cycle iteration process. And we've tried to apply that into our product designs and our product development. And I think that that's really yielding some interesting results, especially on R&D, where you typically have longer cycles, but to force an R&D process through into a Scrum cycle, I think generates a lot of momentum, creates a lot of alignment.
Not every ag tech, food tech startup brings in commercial people right out of the gate. So I think integrating folks across R&D and commercial is very wise. What has surprised you the most about the adventure so far?
It's a hard nut to crack. I mean, working with physical chemistry and physical product, there's a whole set of considerations that are very challenging. And the first thing I would say for me is just been the reality, I would say, of the cycles of dealing with physical products versus, say, software. Quite a significant time gap. That's been a big challenge. The other element I would say is scale and margin are just very different animals than they are in software. And that's also been pretty interesting to understand. Like, how do you build a business that breaks even on raw materials and then creates opportunity for high growth product launches and high growth markets? And I think that's been one of the elements that I think we've made the most progress is really trying to understand how to connect those dots.
And I've heard that from many other founders and operators that there's certain aspects to food that are simply different than what you're going to expect out of like a fintech, clean tech type of company. So it's very consistent feedback. How are you thinking about go to market?
while we are down the path and building a novel emulsifier that we will bring to market and sell as a novel ingredient, ultimately our ambition is slightly farther upstream in the value chain. We ultimately are trying to design a capability to allow for product developers, food innovators to come into our platform to identify and build novel ingredients in the food space or novel components or materials in cosmetics and other adjacencies, and use our system as a discovery tool. That's the first thing I would draw. Then there's a couple components there that underpin that. We are a data-driven, data-first company. What we are doing, what we've developed to date is the largest compositional data set of seaweed, macroalgae, one of the fastest growing organisms on the planet, super crop of the future. And we're really trying to create, and we have created the largest data set of the composition and what drives composition and all the synergies across different seaweed species. There's over 12,000 different species of seaweed, and trying to identify and just build out just a huge data set of all the compounds that can be extracted or can be combined and made just by looking at the crop itself. From that, machine learning elements come into play, really applying molecular modeling and chemoinformatics to understand and model out and predict structure-function relationships based off of the compositional data that we have amassed. That's our starting point. Our customers can come to us, they have a functionality in mind. We can work with them here into the comprehensive data that we have on seaweed to try to tease out which kind of composition and extract or which biomolecule is going to deliver the functionality that they need. So that's the kind of the critical element of our company. It's the first piece that we've developed, and that's why we have a team of software engineers as well. The second piece of it is really just delivering consistency. What we've done is, borrowing heavily from oil and gas, we've built a benchmark stabilized version of seaweed. We take the seaweed, effectively we liquefy it, we turn it into a stable form. We have a chemical fingerprint that we can recreate. We look at the chemistry of our feedstock, chemistry of our benchmark, and then we can adjust the blends of our liquid crude versions of our seaweed to recreate the chemical benchmarks we've designed. And what that allows for is the delivery of a consistent chemical payload for the downstream production of whatever ingredient or system our customers are trying to manufacture. That allows for sort of scalability, controlling cost, dialing in cost, and creating an easy material to work with and design off of.
There's so many interesting AI, predictive modeling, analytics, so many things happening in the food and ag tech space now, which has been really compelling. So do you then partner all the way through commercialization with your customers, or are you focused more on, like you said, upstream on just the R&D activities? Could you break that down a bit?
We're building an emulsifier. I mean, for us, that really is a product that we are invested in. We're going to bring that to market. It serves really, I think, to demonstrate what's possible. And also, we think it's a valuable product with a huge market behind it that's tapping into some pretty major trends in egg replacement, protein delivery, their food as medicine, cleaner label. So we think that there's a big opportunity with just emulsifier. So we're building that. It's a showcase product for us. We're building that from our platform. So we're looking at what's out there in the world of emulsification, methyl cellulose, soy lecithin, different gums and fillers. And we're basically looking at the chemical structure of those existing industry benchmarks and then backing into chemical payloads that our models are showing will deliver outsized emulsion, outsized performance. The downstream element, that DSP part, that's really happening through basic co-manufacturing networks, and we have co-manufacturing relationships to do the last mile extraction.
Do you think of Marine Biologics as a platform company, a product company, or hybrid?
We have an aspiration to be a platform business that manifests in a couple of ways. The idea that product innovators can look at seaweed as an innovation workhorse, that's what we want. A mark of success for us is third-party IP being developed off of our system. We want other companies to come in, design the next generation resins, biopolymers, or texturizers, or whatever functional system that they need for their formulations. We want them to be taking a look at seaweed. And we are developing the tools to make that really easy and that discovery process really easy. That makes it a little bit more platformy, certainly a product. And the second element, I think, comes down to economics. The world of synbio and biomanufacturing today ultimately is the difficulties that we articulate when we're out there talking about what we're doing versus what has existed in biomanufacturing for the last couple decades. SynBio ultimately spends a lot of money and time engineering a biomolecule or a sort of unicellular organism, a bacteria, to produce or secrete a protein or a biomolecule and then harvest that protein or biomolecule, leaving the vast majority of the biomass that's created as a waste stream to try to figure out how to sell. And the costs are not immaterial in producing these biomolecules. And so the valorization story in SynBio, I think, has been really challenging and has been an essential part to try to make the economics work. Like, how do you sell the rest of the stuff that's being made outside of the target molecule? That's a big question mark. Our approach is very different. We're starting there. We basically are working with a biomass that's very valuable across a huge number of industries on a minimally refined basis. So we can take our side streams and sell them into big markets. They're not like necessarily venture style markets. They're pretty stable, mature markets, pet food and agriculture, animal feed, that ultimately aren't producing huge margins, but represent a lot of volume. Through those markets, we're able to basically break even, so valorize our biomass before we even start producing a targeted biomolecule. From that regard, we think we're creating a platform for third-party developers to come in and say, hey, I want to build a really interesting emulsifier. So long as the functionality is sufficiently high enough to command a price that's going to cover that last mile on the downstream, then they can produce. And they don't have to worry about sort of breaking even on 90% of the biomass. That story opens up a new path in biomanufacturing where we could potentially valorize the biomass up front and then use the tools to basically mine and harvest the target molecules on the back end.
Interesting. Sounds like you're taking a very holistic approach to value creation. So interesting to see how that all plays out. How are you learning and applying what your customers or potential partners want? How do you bake that into your strategy?
Ultimately, this is about identifying structure-function relationships. And for our customers, that starts with, what are your functional needs? And then we map that back into the structure-function capabilities that are available within our biomass, which is seaweed. From there, we're able to prototype and create different candidate sets for experimentation and formulation testing, and we go from there. The world of food today is largely like a Lego set. Food innovators and product developers, you go to like conferences like FFP or IFP, and they're presented with hundreds, thousands of new Lego pieces. They then have to figure out how to jerry rig back into whatever formulation they're trying to build. What we are trying to create is a little bit of a different approach for food innovators, where they can come in and say, hey, I have a specific formulation challenge. I need a specific kind of functionality. They can come to our platform and we can work with them to design from first principles an ingredient that is tailored to their formulation needs without firing up fermentation tanks and all that kind of stuff. We think our approach is fast, customizable, and allows for an approach to product innovation that is new.
Is there a food or beverage category that you think is particularly ripe for new product innovation that your team is looking at?
The areas that we look at are in emulsification, barrier systems, binding systems, and structure systems, and where we can deliver outside performance, where you're seeing emulsifiers today and where we think we can outperform. There's lots of other opportunities. And that's just looking at the biomass that we work with, which is seaweed, which has this incredible abundance of chemical diversity. We are seeing opportunities certainly in the big categories: food as medicine, clean label, and just better overall nutrition. There's also just more narrowly, there's opportunities to create sodium reduction products, protein delivery products. There are uniquely a set of marine sulfated polysaccharides that are rich with bioactive activity that are a great opportunity for food formulation or for formulators in food, also nutraceuticals. We really see there's a pretty interesting opportunity there too.
Broad opportunities across many different sectors and categories, which is really interesting. You operate in Europe as well as within the US at this point. Is there anything that has come out of working on the two continents that would be interesting to share here? I'm curious about maybe the challenges or the opportunities that that's afforded you and the team.
It cuts in two directions. We have a R&D center in Canada between Alaska and continental United States. In Alaska, there's a lot of farmers that we work with, suppliers that we use for procurement. We're developing and building out our stabilized biomass, what we call crude. We borrow heavily from the oil and gas world. So we build these crudes in Canada and Alaska right now. And when we try to bring them into our lab in Berkeley, California, We don't have any issues, but recently we've had some challenges driving lorries full of liquid crude seaweeds. Always tough to explain to a border agent.
Right.
Those are things that are easy to navigate. On the tailwind side, what we're talking about enabling is literal reshoring, which is, I think, a little political zeitgeist right now in Washington, where the United States has a competitive advantage on its territorial waters and the economies that can be developed off of our coastlines. Seaweed is a crop that is, I think, an incredibly charismatic crop, one that requires no input, no fertilizer, no pesticide, no irrigation, and ultimately can be grown in environments where the local economy is in trouble. This could be a source of huge job creation. If you look more narrowly at what tariffs mean to the cost of procuring traditional seaweed ingredients, Alaska, Maine, even Washington State, the economics look a little bit better for farmers in those areas to grow seaweed and sell it as a crop, as a raw ingredient.
I love the idea of it being a charismatic crop. I started thinking, well, what other crops are charismatic?
We could potentially do this with other crops, but I mean, I don't think the world needs more soy or corn. Humanity is going to have to figure out the oceans and how to extract biomass from the oceans in sustainable ways. Seaweed is going to be a big, big part of that. If we want to feed and fuel the planet and for the future generations, the oceans are going to be a big part of that story. And seaweed, again, one of the fastest growing crops, is a play a significant role.
I have seen from other companies in the blue economy focusing on job creation. Is that something that when you speak with investors or other parties that becomes part of the conversation? Is that of interest?
No. Maybe it was of interest a few years ago. There's a cold reality to the venture world right now, which is technical viability, unit economics, and commercial traction. That's what we have to talk about and what we have to show. And it was always there. I think a lot of the other positive externalities have sort of dropped in terms of prominence and talking points. Even if you're building a business that has an impact, it has to deliver superior product performance at a sustainable cost and pricing. That's ultimately what we're up against.
It'll be interesting to see how, again, that develops, unfolds, because in the hearts of many of the folks who are investing in these places, they care a lot about those things. We're talking about other things on the list right now. So I appreciate your candid answer, though, to that question. Those things are important. When you look to the future, Patrick, what do you see ahead?
Biomanufacturing, I think, is going to get more narrowly defined. Traditional synbio, I think, is going to be really the winners in that space. I think will be really focused on therapeutics, pharmaceuticals, and protein discovery. I think it'll be really difficult for precision fermentation businesses that are focused on like food to make it. I think there's a really difficult economics story there. Outside of a place like China, like maybe if it happens, it's going to happen in China, like where it's heavily subsidized and you have massive population challenges. And I think the economics kind of make sense. We are in a world that will be governed by functionality, and the ability to create hyper functionality and really dial in on the relationship between functionality and pricing is going to be the bellwether for the strength of the space. That's where our company is focused today. The valorization part of the economic story is achievable, and it can be achievable without a lot of distraction. It can be done through sort of over-the-fence relationships and some pretty broad-based offtake agreements on sort of side streams and the bulk of the biomass. The rest of it is going to be the strength of these new tools, machine learning, artificial intelligence, predictive models to hone in on structure-function relationships that can then be extracted without expensive equipment and expensive processes. That's what's on the horizon for this space, is more structure function relationships, more artificial intelligence. You're already seeing that. Even Meta has just come out with a new model all around pulling out functionality from materials and crops. So we think that this is really where the space is going to be heading.
Well, I've enjoyed our conversation, Patrick, and learning more about you as a leader and the work that you're doing at Marine Biologics. It was great to meet you, and thank you for being on FoodTech Stories.
Thank you, Megan. It was great.
Thanks for joining us today on the latest episode of FoodTech Stories. Be sure and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform and keep an eye out for our bi-weekly episodes. I'm your host, Megan Thomas, founder of Ladder 17. FoodTech Stories is edited by TJG Media.